Tonight's guest, Paul Eno, believes that UFO encounters also have paranormal traits and should be investigated accordingly. Let's find out why in 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to California Haunts Radio. As you can hear in the background, I've once again got my air conditioning going. It is hot. I'll tell you, my living room doesn't have AC, so by the time I get in here, I'm totally wiped out. I can't believe how tired you get when it's like so hot. But man, all I want to do is sleep. Then I get in here and my energy's like off the charts. Anyway, I want to welcome you all. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. If you're watching from YouTube, welcome. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. There's a little ghost kind of flying around. Well, he's not flying around, but he's down there in the bottom right-hand corner. And he's got a magnifying glass on, the Sherlock Holmes hat. That's our mascot. And if you could be so kind as to subscribe, we're always looking for subscribers. That would be terrific. Or follow us on Facebook. That'd be great. Or follow me on Facebook for that matter. I'm easy to find. Everything I have is public. So you can just look me up, find me, follow me. And that would be great too. But if you could subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. We have 250 videos over there, and every one of those videos is different topics. I'm a journalist by trade, and I enjoy covering different stories, different types of stories. So you're not only going to get paranormal UFO things going on, you are also going to get, I hate when things dangle. You're also going to get spousal abuse stories. You're going to get stories of murders. You're going to get things like that because I like to cover a wide variety of topics. Anyway, welcome. It's Wednesday, night after primary elections here in California. I don't like to talk politics, but that was a big night last night. But anyway, my guest tonight is Paul Eno. He's written a lot of books on the paranormal. One that was fascinating and interested me so much was aliens, UFOs, and the paranormal, and the parallels that run with that. And we'll probably get into that in our talk. And the reason why I got into that is because I read a book here live online called The Mojave Incident. And it's not the first time I'd read the book. I had read the book previously many, many years ago. And what interested me with this book was that as a paranormal investigator, we encounter clients that tell us, and also when we're on the field, right? We encounter clients that tell us about cold spots and people that walk through walls. And you even wonder about the EVPs, because the EVPs that we get, some of them sound mechanical. Or some of them sound so far away. Or like they're underwater, things like that. Like maybe they're from some other dimension or something like that. But after I started reading the Mojave Incident and what happened after the husband and wife were abducted, my attention kind of the whole thing made me wonder whether or not, as a ghost hunter, are we hunting ghosts or are we hunting aliens? Because a lot of the things that they experienced, like when she knew the aliens were in the room with her, the room got very cold. The little boy talked about little men that had red eyes. I mean, there's reports of that. There's these troll things that follow people on some paranormal cases. So I mean, it got me to thinking and wondering really about what we are investigating. So hopefully I can talk to Paul about that tonight because it's something that's been really interesting. It's been really intriguing to me for a long time. Okay. Again, my name is Charlotte. I run the paranormal group, California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of Sacramento. We're 35 strong up and down the state. So if you have any paranormal needs, we will come out and take a look for you. And because we have 35, we're 35, we're not just all in Sacramento. We're in different counties. So if you're in a county that we don't cover, we're able to get to you no matter what. So if you have a problem, like I said earlier, look me up on Facebook. Check out CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com, CaliforniaHaunts.org, and I'll get back to you ASAP, and we can start, going over stuff with you. Okay. Also, another announcement. I forgot. See that? I'm getting senile in my old age. It's horrible when you get old. Oh yes, I'm in the market for an EQ. I decided my voice annoys me. So I decided I'm looking for an EQ so I can lower my voice a little bit. I'm kind of like going for that Roz Doyle sound from Frasier, where I can be like, Hello, California haunts. See, I even asked me doing that. Hello, California haunts. How is everybody tonight? Anyway, little bit of humor for start to show off. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Paul in, and he can tell you about himself. He's got a huge paranormal resume, very impressive, and we can get rolling on this. All right, here we go. Sit back and enjoy the ride, folks. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Well, good evening from New England.
Fantastic. I love New England. It reminds me of parts of Northern California.
Yeah, well, the temperatures do lately, and you caught me in the middle of my annual spring allergy attack. The pollen here is just really horrendous. So, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tell me about you, because I know you have a paranormal resume that goes back quite a bit.
Yeah, 52 years actually. Time flies when you're having fun. Well, I was, I'll tell you, Charlotte, I was studying for the priesthood,
Hmm.
and I was wondering about ghosts. And I entered the seminary in 1967 at the age of 14 when you could still do that. Not a good idea emotionally. And then I ended up graduating from two seminaries, two academic levels, and then I changed churches and entered the Orthodox Church. I went to their seminary, and then they threw me the hell out a couple of years later because they didn't like my paranormal work. They did not like Ed and Lorraine Warren, with whom I was working at the time. So maybe the church and I had a lucky escape. I spent 10 years in the seminary, was never ordained to anything. So I say might be just as well. But in any case, all through those years, starting in 1970, I was interested in ghosts, and what really got me started was 10 years before that, in 1961, when my father, I was witness to my father's suicide. Terrible thing to even have to mention, but it just, well, I wonder, where is my father? I was in a strict Roman Catholic school where, if you ate a hot dog on Friday or committed suicide, you went straight to hell.
Right.
Excuse me. So I it was just, I went to one, they had the Sisters of Mercy, if you believe the name, in school. And they were either saints or potential axe murderers, nothing in between. Fortunately, in second grade, I had one of the saints. And I said, "Where is my father?" I mean, and I knew that they were trying to keep from me that he had committed suicide, but I was there. So it was like, she said, well, God is kind of bigger than all that. That got me through. And my brother was ordained to the priesthood in '63, so there would have been two of us. And
Hmm.
so in the seminary, they didn't talk about this.
Hmm.
You'd think priests were trained in the paranormal, but they're not. Certain select ones are. There was
Hmm.
one lonely book in the entire seminary library of about 10,000 books about the subject, Ghosts and Poltergeists by Herbert Thurston, British Jesuit. And even those cases were stuff he heard about secondhand, most of them. So in 1970, I decided to pursue my first case. And in the Hartford Courant in Connecticut, I happened to see a story of an old man who would walk around this old settlement that had been vacated since the 1890s. And
Hmm.
he would get all kinds of weird pictures on his old 1940s box camera. Things today we might call orbs and all stuff like that. So I said, well, let me go check this out, because I was forming the theory that maybe ghosts or earthbound spirits and all this stuff are souls in purgatory. Good old Catholic kid. Maybe that was the thing. So I'm going to test this out. So five other seminary students came with. We had several expeditions to this place, and we got far more than we ever expected. You no sooner walked into this place, and it was all overgrown woods and stuff, the cellar holes where the houses had been. You could hear the sounds of daily life for somebody else. You could hear farm implements, banging together. You could hear cows, dogs, kids, people talking, and nobody was there. And even for New England, this was an isolated place. There was nothing around. Of the many things that happened, and I've written about this in several books. When the dusk was descending, the katydids had started making their sounds. We were standing above Nightingale Brook, because all woods, and there were a couple of cellar holes. we heard the sound of children laughing and playing. But this was my first experience of the spatial oddities that can occur during these cases. They were moving rapidly up and down this brook as if they were in a car. There wasn't even a road anywhere near there. And we all heard it. And it was kind of an EVP, because the term EVP, I don't think it had even been invented yet, but it was kind of an EVP in reverse. We could hear it, but we couldn't tape it. And I do mean tape. We had the high tech equipment of the time, which was a cassette tape recorder, a couple of notebooks, and a couple of cameras.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the funny thing for me was that I knew the names of some of those children. I just did. I was already on thin ice at the seminary for even doing this. I didn't dare mention anything that could have been construed as mediumistic or psychic. It would have been out in my ear before I was. And then the other things that happened, probably one of the most dramatic was on the second expedition, which was in the fall of 71. It was a Sunday morning, bright, a cloud in the sky. We heard an ox cart, or what sounded like an ox cart, coming down this cart path that we were standing on. And we stood aside. And because we figured maybe somebody is a team driver for a hobby or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it came by us, and we couldn't see it. It was about 20 feet away. It wasn't on the path we were on. It was on what used to be a road going through a thicket. And we could hear the guy yelling, "Hya," and the crack of a whip, the hoof beats, the wooden wagon wheels. And the first thing I said was, we were stunned, was, are there ghosts, quote unquote, of wooden wheels and the oxen and the whip and all that? Maybe what we're dealing with has more to do with time than with death. I didn't see any evidence these people were dead at all, never mind being in some kind of purgatory. So I really had to reevaluate. And the other guys didn't have a clue anyway.
Right.
So that was my first field case, called The Village of Voices. And many years later, I found a book of local history that said that this place was known for precisely these sounds. And now, I was an early advocate of the idea of residual hauntings, quote unquote. Okay, that somehow this gets recorded on the environment when it happens. It gets played back. There's somebody who's got a brain tuned to FM 1240 or something. And but then I said, how would that happen? Even for any kind of of an audio recording, you need fantastic amounts of ferrous oxide. The soil's not the same. The trees aren't the same. Maybe the stone walls and the rocks, but I mean, there's, I think that's an explanation for people who don't understand the subject of our discussion tonight: parallel universes.
Right.
All right. Now that concept has been around in quantum mechanics and in literature, at least for 120, 130 years, maybe more. And that really began to. I was very confused by the end of the 70s. I was reading all these cases, people seeing ghosts of themselves, people seeing phantom buildings, animals, and stuff that wasn't there the next day. And I said that these old ideas are not good enough. There has to be more to it than that. Finally, in 1979, you stop me if I'm rambling on here.
But, no, go ahead. It's fine.
In 1979, I ran into a case. I'd been thrown out of the seminary. I'd done some graduate work and had nothing, and was living in a little house by a lake in Connecticut when my phone rang. And I'd recently made my first TV appearance on this subject. And a young lady from the University of Connecticut said that she had been in Maine, maybe about 100 miles from where I was, the previous weekend. And she said if she lived to be 100, she'd never forget what had happened. So the short version is that were driving along with some friends, and they happened to see a ordinary garden variety ranch house by the side of the road in a town that turned out to be York Harbor. So the younger sister, not the one I was talking to, but the younger one,
right,
decided to really that she said, "I know this house. That's my house. Never seen it before." Jumped out and ran up to the front door before they could stop her. Well, she started knocking on the door. The others ran up, and a woman answered the door, took one look at this girl, screamed when she saw her, and like kind of stumbled back. A man came to the door. This turned out to be a childless couple in their 40s,
Mhm.
and he couldn't speak when he saw her. Everybody had the creeps by this time, and the girl finally said, "I'm sorry to bother you. I just felt as though I know this house." And the man said, "You should know this house. You haunt it."
Wow.
So I said, "This is something new." So they figured retreat was the better part of valor, and then they apologized and left. But they did catch a name on the mailbox.
Mhm.
Now, as dumb luck would have it, my mother's family had a summer home near here on the ocean since 1872. So, needless to say, I spent a lot of summers there, and I knew a lot of the people. So I did some inquiry, and sure enough, I found out the phone number of these people. If I had better not call the guy, he'll probably have a heart attack. So I wrote him a letter, and I put every reference, every priest, every psychologist, whatever I'd ever worked with in this field, just to
Mhm.
give him some confidence. Well, 3 days later, my phone rang, and the guy's voice was shaking. He said, "We have to talk about this to somebody." So off I go to Maine, and the story I heard was this: they had seen this girl in transparent form doing various things around the house, particularly looking out the front window and coming down the stairs. They had become so frightened to be in their own house that they would not go into any rooms by themselves.
Mhm.
Needless to say, this was not sustainable, and they ended up selling the place. So the girl, in the meantime, I sent her to Hartford for the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, which, if anybody is in the business and knows, is a pre-diagnostic tool to see if you need any psychiatric treatment. Well, she didn't. But the story I got from her was that she had vivid dreams of doing exactly what they had seen her doing in their house, only not at the same time she was doing them. So I was so dazzled by the whole picture here that I left that for later. So this is what nudged me. And of course, as soon as they met on that front at that front door, all phenomena ceased immediately. It never happened again for either of them. And a physicist might say that if I knew then what I think I know now,
Mhm.
that the wave function had been collapsed, that the two worlds had joined, and no more paranormal activity on that score. So this is what really pushed me over the edge into physics, which is a lot weirder than paranormal studies in many ways. And we had this apparently people sharing the same consciousness and the same parallel worlds, and then the worlds joining. I mean, that seems to be what was happening. That was the interpretation. So I started to change my theories and methods. And holy mackerel, everything changed in all my cases coming up. The approach from this point of view, things really opened up. People said, "Yeah, that makes sense." And Ben and I, to this day, will lecture widely and we'll talk about this. And people come up and say, "That's what's been happening to me all my life, and now I know what it is. I don't have to be afraid of it anymore."
Mhm.
That there are things you should be afraid of, but that at least people knowledge of something helps you be less afraid of it because you can be prepared for it. So if we're right, if our theories are correct, the results have been pretty amazing. So that's how that got started.
Well, I find this interesting because I've heard other people talk about the parallel universes and how I had one gentleman on the show who said that there could be at least 12 parallel universes.
Well, that's string theory.
Yeah, string
Uh,
theory out
yeah,
there.
which is an attempt to unite Newtonian physics with quantum physics. Now, the funny thing with physics is that they'll come up with, and again, excuse my voice,
Sure.
is that they'll come up with some theory that there's no evidence for except circumstantial evidence and hope that it will pan out. Now that's good. That it works, and
Hmm.
many times it has panned out, and you've come up with new understanding of various of the oddities in physics.
Hmm.
But the thing too with that is that there were other cases that sort of took a back door into this, and starting in '73, 2 years after this initial case in Connecticut, I was studying for the priesthood in Ogdensburg, New York, which you probably never heard of. I hadn't either. seminary there. Now, my boss, the Bishop John Marshall of Burlington, Vermont, did not like this paranormal activity on my part, and decided he was going to keep me out of mischief by sending me to a seminary I never even heard of in the middle of nowhere up on the Canadian border on the St. Lawrence River in northern New York. Well, unfortunately for Bishop Marshall, the diocesan exorcist, Father Lawrence Cotter, lived at the seminary. And I didn't know who he was. He didn't teach, and he had this sort of buzzy voice, and he sort of glide down the hallways. I didn't know who he was. Well, he found out about me and that I've been working with Ed and Lorraine Warren, the people from the Conjuring movies, that sort of thing. And he called me to his room, and after a number of conversations, he was the chaplain at the state mental institution down the road, the St. Lawrence State Hospital, where a lot of strange things would go on. And he was just ostensibly the Catholic chaplain, but when stuff started flying off shelves and hitting hospital staff in the rooms of people who were diagnosed with one psychosis or another, they'd call him in very often, and there would be exorcism. So I assisted him with that. Now I was the tender age of 20, and so I got an eyeful and an earful. But it's still, I just get the impression that the approach was wrong, or at least inadequate. Because the first of the worst that I ever saw was the case of Barbara, who was a 17-year-old kid who said that she was playing host to a demon named Chal. I didn't know what that was, and of course, you didn't have the internet in those days. But I would do a lot of research for Father Cotter, and I would see. I found out that Chal, somebody taught at Harvard named Chal in psychology, oddly enough. But this seminary faculty was very supportive of me. I was very surprised. They set up special courses for me in abnormal psychology. But of course, to see who was nuts and who was having paranormal problems. But the thing with that is that those can be intertwined. So to get back to Barbara's case, at one point she floated out of the wheelchair, and this guy named Leonard and I had to push her back. There was always the priest. There were 2 nurses, a doctor, and 2 attendants, of which I was one. So I just got the impression this thing was playing with us. Mm-hmm. It was acting more like a parasite than a demon. And that really got me started on the whole idea of what are today called energy parasites. These things, they'll push your buttons. They'll be whatever you expect them to be. They'll pretend to be Uncle Chuck, who died, 20 years before, just to eat. Because they're part of nature. They're part of life, their life forms. Mm-hmm. And I started to sort of get set on that idea with this. And I would talk to Father Cotter, but I'm a 20-year-old seminarian, like they're going to listen to me. And I would say stuff like, there are places in the ritual where the priest demands to know the name of the demon. All right. That's because of their gospel precedence for that. Jesus always did it. So I said, how do you know he's telling the truth? A demon, for crying out loud. And he said, well, they're bound by the power of Christ to tell the truth. So, okay. I accepted that. But I can't say I still believed it, because these things, I swear, I've run into the same entities on several occasions, and they give different names and all that, but that's a long story. So from the viewpoint of ghosts, the old ideas didn't make sense. From the viewpoint of demons, the old ideas didn't make sense. And then finally, by the end of the 70s, I was, trying to cook up some new approach to this. Mm-hmm. And something told me, go outside of the quote unquote haunted house, look around, talk to the neighbors if you can. Sure enough, half the time when you could talk to the neighbors, they would say they were having issues too, but they didn't want to say anything about it. Or they were seeing UFOs or strange creatures or things of this kind. And this, in my mind, was the birth of what we now call the flap area. Okay. Mm-hmm. And finally, by 2005, because I've been through a couple of decades of this, my young son, Ben, who was then 13, joined me in this work because he was born for it. I was trying to, like at one point, we had the haunted policeman of Vermont, right? And he lived in the basement underneath his parents' house. He was unmarried. and there was something going on in that yard, the backyard, where there would be a very negative feeling there, and there was an entity, there was a parasite to us, and he would say, "It's funny you explain it that way because as hunters and those seeking food, because whenever my girlfriend and I will fight, the thing will come in. They literally would see it, would knock stuff off shelves, and feed on their negativity." And Ben actually got a photograph of this thing, and I was afraid to show it to him. He said, "Oh, that's really cool, Dad. It's like a Black Rider from Lord of the Rings, you know." So he was great with it, and I'd have him by my side anytime now. And we're still not. And now he's 30 and married, and we're still out there kicking and doing our own radio show and stuff like that. So everything I was running into said that the old ideas were inadequate and a new approach was needed. We call it the progressive paranormal theories and methods. No intention of referring to politics.
Right. So you think there's a link between UFO sightings and alien sightings to the paranormal then? That there's a direct link?
Yeah, definitely. Because we find all these connections in these flap areas. The largest flap area we are still working on started in 2005. You know, and I get a kick out of these people who say, "Oh, they're 40 years old and I've done thousands of cases." Well, what do you consider a case, and how long do you spend on it? Uh, I've been doing this for over 50 years. That would mean I'd have to do 20 or 30, I think up to 40 cases in 1 year. Nobody can do that. So we work on cases for years. The Litchfield Triangle in Connecticut, for example, started in 05, one of Ben's first cases, working with me. And so we've been working on that for all these years, and it just keeps getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
More witnesses, more phenomena. We're over into the Hudson Valley of New York at this point. We've got about 330 square miles we're dealing with. Now, how do you deal with that? Well, through our radio show, we have reporters, and we literally have a spy network. And we set it up so they don't know each other, so that the suggestibility is generally not a factor. But we're still going through police reports. There were all sorts of changes in public behavior, ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, everywhere, and this sort of thing. In Pennsylvania, we're dealing with it with the Triangle in Clearfield County there too, and then that's a new case that only started 2016. So I've run into Bigfoot personally. So is one of our other guys. We have what MUFON considers one of the two best UFO videos they've ever seen. Matter of fact, I don't know if you can show that, but I have a link to it I could send, or just you could look at it privately. I can put it in the chat.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to put it up on the website later so people can see.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat right now. And there we go. So yeah, I mean, that was it really knocks your socks off. And we have neighborhood meetings in that area with up to 35 people showing up, pre-COVID, and they've all seen weird lights and seen Bigfoot. It's like nothing. Even the restaurant, we couldn't meet at people's houses anymore. There were too many attendees. So even at the Over the Mountain restaurant in Rockton, PA, they have a Bigfoot theme because everybody knows about it, So I think it's when you look outside of a case, you're going to find all sorts of unexpected things, and it's all connected through this multiverse idea. John Keel, particularly famous for the Mothman episodes of the 1960s, a New York journalist, and I have a journalism background too, just like you, and he would talk about window areas, where all sorts of things would come through that are not typically, or at least not traditionally, related to each other. Ghost hunters used to be ghost hunters. Bigfoot researchers, would do that, and nobody ever thought they were connected. Now, there's a lot of notion in the field all around that these things are connected, and they have to be investigated kind of as a whole. So that's where we are.
Oh, absolutely. I was just reading a comment in the chat room. My question in all this too is that when we talk about the parallel universes, how does that work? I mean, in your research, how does that work exactly? Because I know I've been out and seen what I thought were friends walking around, and it turns out it's not them. It's like a double. Or I've seen that. I've seen my double at like an airport or someplace. So how does that work exactly?
Well, I go back to the case in Maine where people were experiencing the same worlds. The thing with the young girl who was the ghost in the house was that she said that in her dreams that was her house,
Hmm.
and she had two children. Matter of fact, she said when she first saw the front yard, she said, "Why aren't there any toys?" It just popped into her mind,
Hmm.
and so I never really got too much into that because this is early and everybody was dazzled by the rest of it. But apparently, we had parallel worlds being shared by the same people. Now, there are all sorts of implications for this, scientific, spiritual, even our own point of view about ourselves,
Hmm.
because the implications of the kind of multiverse theory that we embrace, because this is what we see, and then there are different interpretations. Some people stick with the string theory. You got 11 or 12 parallel worlds, and others think there are infinite numbers. Okay, with infinite versions of ourselves, and all possible outcomes being real. Now, with my theological education, I was never ordained to anything, but I got the education. I couldn't help but look at it from the point of view. Well, everybody gripes, about God because everything's unjust, and we're going to swoop in and save us from ourselves and all this. And yeah, and that's a legitimate concern. On the other hand, if we're too limited to see the multiverse in all its meaning, we're not seeing the possible idea that all possible outcomes are out there, and the whole thing forms a perfect elegance. Just because we can't see it or don't experience it
Hmm.
doesn't mean it's not there. So that's one point of view that we happen to find intriguing. Maybe it is a perfect creation, or maybe God is not fully developed yet. Maybe he, she, it, or them is learning along with us.
Hmm.
There are all kinds of theological possibilities here, for which I'm usually roasted by half the listenership, because that doesn't agree with their beliefs, but whatever. So, but as far as again how it works is that there were old Hollywood productions. If anybody's my age, they might remember Sliders or Quantum Leap or something.
Yeah.
All of it. Hollywood never gets it right, especially when it comes to science. So the parallel worlds are not like that. We've had physicists of the caliber of Fred Allen Wolf on our show agreeing with us about our interpretation, talking about the quantum foam or the space time foam, FOAM, that was formed at the Big Bang, which of course itself is now being debated again.
Right.
And you have bubbles or spheres or whatever, each which is its own world with its own laws of physics, but they will operate kind of in tandem. They will connect at certain points. Sometimes they'll pop. Sometimes they'll combine. And so this is something I think that can explain paranormal activity. We talk about world families, families of worlds
Hmm.
where they're separate worlds, but the laws of physics are very, very similar or the same, and you don't have uh, tremendous differences there. When that is jostled somehow by whatever,
Hmm.
you have situations where you have very different worlds with very different laws of physics combining or intersecting, and then you get me standing in the Bridgeport, Connecticut house in 1974 with police officers and firefighters watching a 300-pound refrigerator levitate off the floor. That kind of thing. Or you get what other things that happen in that case. The kid being thrown across the room by the quote unquote demon, as we believe it at the time. And so I think that's really how it works. The whole thing is interactive, and we're not at the point of our revolution where we can see it. Working in the psychiatric hospital, I worked in two as a part of pastoral training for the priesthood that never came. Uh, I would run into people who were diagnosed with schizophrenia, and
Hmm.
among the symptoms of that, you hear voices and you see things. some of these people, because were just gone. Other people who were diagnosed with that were incredibly brilliant. You look into their eyes, it's knowing, very knowing look you'd get back. They knew historical events like they'd been there. They knew future events as if they'd been there, some of them. And I have often addressed groups of or twice, I should say, addressed groups of psychiatrists on this
Mhm.
and said, I got the impression that we're the ones who are living in the false world. They might be experiencing parallel lives that are real. And of course, the steam comes out of the ears and the eyes turn red. But a bunch of them would come up to me after the lecture and say, I've often suspected the same thing. But if I said it, I'd lose my job.
Mhm.
So, that's what we're facing. So I think it's the first day of school. And the motto of our show was everything you know is wrong.
Right.
And it probably is, including ourselves, because we're all, just trying to learn here. But I think the evidence is absolutely overwhelming that the old ideas are completely off, too
Mhm.
narrow, and that we're living in an entirely new kind of creation that only our remotest ancestors knew a lot about. I've spoken with shamans in different parts of the world. I'm thinking of one, a particular one in Australia in 1979, who little tiny guy, Australian Aboriginal elder, and he said I was lucky because they usually don't talk to outsiders, but I was already into this idea of the parallel worlds. He said, "You're on the right track. That's what we do." He said, "We go into these parallel worlds. The vision is like going into the ground through a hole or something of that kind." But he said, essentially, we're going into parallel worlds and bringing back what we need here for the people who we're trying to help. For example, according to him, there was a woman in his group who had cancer. He went into a parallel world where she didn't have cancer, collapsed the wave function, as a physicist might say, and she didn't have cancer anymore. Uh, and the real one, what really takes the cake are the returns from the dead. Okay, he said he hadn't done this himself, but he knew a shaman when he was a boy himself who had done this. He said he saw it himself many years before. There had been a young boy who had died, or we don't even use it with all this in mind. How can you die? We use the word translate.
Right.
That's a very ancient theological concept. So the boy had passed or translated, and the family was devastated, and they paid the shaman a lot of money to do something about it. So he supposedly went into a parallel world where the boy had not died, some other part of the world family where he hadn't died. Literally took him by the arm, dragged him back across the membrane, what a physicist would call a membrane, into this world. It was not a good idea. The kid didn't know some of his brothers and sisters because they didn't have him in the other world. He was very confused about where he was, very unhappy, and eventually he just kind of lost it. So, and Minda Louie, the shaman I was talking to, said, there's a reason why the multiverse or the universe is set up the way it is, because we're not ready for this stuff.
Right.
Now, you've go back a few years
Right.
to when I was still at the seminary, northern New York. I would go up to the Akwesasne reservation up there on the border to teach the kids. And one of the shaman there, I don't know, that's how I met the shaman from Quebec, from the Cree tribe. So I'm up there, and he told me exactly, not the same story, but a very similar story of when, and I hadn't mentioned this from Australia because I hadn't been there yet. He mentioned that there was a young man who had died. They had paid the shaman a lot of money. This is when he was a kid too, and the guy was brought back in the same way. And he walked to work past his own grave every day. And again, he said it wasn't resurrection, wasn't reincarnation. They literally dragged him back from a world where he never died. So this stuff sent me for a loop and really got me into the current theories that we use now. So these are indications of how this apparently works.
Well, my question, what I was reading a few minutes ago in the chat room was a concerned listener who said, "Well, what about, you know, our deceased family members coming back to talk to us or visit us?"
Oh yeah, well this is well known. The key to understanding that, I think, is to realize, and with all due respect to the founders of our country, that
Uh-huh.
we are not individuals, and not in the sense of what Ben and I call the island theory. You
Hmm.
know, the island theory is just something we assume that everything within us is within us. You know, our consciousness, our intelligence, our whole life is within our minds, within our brains, within our bodies. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. And that's why we're boggled by things like ESP, you know, extrasensory perception. Oh,
Hmm.
how could that happen? And all this. Well, it happens because we're all literally connected in one life, really. Not only is that true for all of us, it's true for all of the other us's,
Hmm.
the other versions or facets, as we call it, in parallel realities. It's all one big life. How is it, for example, that Mozart could sit down at the age of 4, start composing brilliant piano concerti,
Right.
performing before all the crowned heads of Europe because of his genius? Probably, if this is correct, it's probably because he's already aware. We don't even use the past tense because one of the principles of the multiverse that we accept is the simultaneity of all time. There is no past, there is no future. So Mozart is aware where he's already a great composer,
Hmm.
you know, and so he's united with his facets, a couple of anyway, and he has all this talent. You see this all over the place throughout spirituality, whether people know it or not.
Right.
Things that might illustrate this principle. So, as far as our loved ones are concerned, and this is really not on the question, but I get a kick out of the idea. Oh, your loved ones. What if you couldn't stand the person? You know, you don't want to have them back. You know, but we talk about this all the time on our show. And when my mother translated in 2011, a
Hmm.
lot of people wrote into the show, you know, very compassionately, kind of saying in a way, okay, wise guys, you know, how do you handle the loss of a loved one?
Hmm.
So I said, it's not that she's still with us; it's that we are with her in many, many worlds where she never died,
Okay.
and we have a better relationship than ever,
Hmm.
and that's still true. You know, and how do you experience these worlds? Well, you are experiencing them in your subconscious. That seems to be what it's all about. In this life we're living here, that we're conscious of here, is part of our subconscious there. I think it's really quite that simple, if you want to call it simple. So I think again, it's not that they're still with us, but we're still with them in many ways, and it's as real. That's as real as it gets. We just have to see it.
So really, these dreams that people have of deceased loved ones could be a trip to another universe, a parallel
Oh,
universe.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, I really came to the conclusion. I have a dream record I've kept for 25 years.
Hmm.
And when I go back to look at a dream from, you know, 1999, it jumps right back. It's real. And as a journalist, I was a newspaper editor. I was the wire editor at the Providence Journal, which is the Metro Daily around here.
Hmm.
And you know, you put out the morning paper at night, so you work essentially a second shift. I get home 1 or 2 in the morning. I get up and take, because my wife had sort of banker's hours. I take the boys down to the school bus, and I take a nap in the afternoon to make up for it.
Hmm.
I still kind of do that. You know, I have a kind of a short night and a short nap in the afternoon that will take care of that. And unfortunately, I work at home for myself, so I have that luxury. But the point being that I remember more dreams than most people do because I have that broken sleep schedule.
Hmm.
And there are one of many examples. My wife and I visit this cafe on a street corner in Pennsylvania, of all places. And Rhode Island is nowhere near Pennsylvania. Uh, and we have life memories of the place. We know people. We have. We can tell you all about it. It's a real world, and Ben and I found that Ben, my son, that we were sharing the same dreams of the same parallel worlds. I would begin the dream, he would finish it, or he would start it and I would finish it. probably the most far out example was when we were on Coast to Coast AM. I think it was 2010, and George Nuri was asking us about the same topic you're discussing,
Mhm.
and we said, should we talk about the good world or shouldn't we? The whole country be laughing at us, but we brought it up, and it was a world Ben and I and some other people had experienced. It's not heaven, no, but it seems to be a world in which our species is far more at home. And people work, their
Mhm.
modes of transportation. It's very beautiful. Everything is alive. It's kind of like the dream time that the Aboriginals might talk about.
Mhm.
And so George said, "I've never heard you this far out before." I said, "Well, we've never showed you that we are this far out."
Mhm.
So we expected all kinds of an uproar, because you're on that show, you get thousands of emails. So we got over 3,000 emails. Two were negative, and one guy later apologized. Other people were writing in talking about experiences they had had in what sounded like the good world, places we knew existed there but hadn't mentioned ever, and they were talking about them. So something was going on here that had to do with parallel worlds and kind of what we call the unity with a capital U of people experiencing these same things. And they don't talk about it because they don't want to be considered weird in our society. But I think there's a lot of sharing going on here. There's I hope it's a kind of awakening. Again, first day of school. So that's just another example of that.
Do you think that the deja vu that we feel is maybe when we have either a memory of a parallel world or at some point the two worlds collide?
Well, I think probably all of the above. Now, there's another point of view on that, and if you haven't excuse me, had him as a guest, you should. And that's Anthony Peake, the great British consciousness researcher and author, dear friend of mine. We tie into each other's work all the time, and he ties into deja vu in his next book, "Cheating the Ferryman," reference to the ancient ideas about the ferryman when you die. Ferrying you across the river Styx,
Right.
and you have to pay him. I don't know what he does with the money. I've always wondered that. But in any case, there are different points of view on that. But as far as deja vu is concerned, yes, I think it's an experience of what you've already done in a parallel world. Because the thing is, the time is really not, that doesn't really exist. Einstein got into quantum physics. He thought it was too crazy, but he couldn't deny it. But even his special theory of relativity
Mhm.
is that time implies that time is all simultaneous. There is no past, there is no future. It's all simultaneous. We just experience it that way, past and future, because we're not at a point in our evolution yet where we,
Mhm.
we can take it all in. Right? And when we do, we're schizophrenic and they lock you in the state hospital, at least they used to. Now they fill your pockets full of antipsychotic drugs, and you're probably the one who's normal and they're not.
Right.
So that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think the deja vu is just one example of just about everybody experiences.
Now let's talk about past lives a little bit on this then. Just to
Okay,
go
well,
that rabbit
yeah,
hole. We're here. Do you think
yeah. Of course,
tend
I'm
to
sorry.
okay, little kids tend to experience past life stuff more so than adults. So is it because they're more open to it, mentally or whatever, for them to experience it?
Oh yeah, I think so. Though this is educated out of us, but the thing with past lives is if there's no past, you can't have past lives. So what we're looking at is parallel lives. Like it's six of one, half dozen of the other. They
Hmm.
can be at different times. I make it a point when I speak with regression therapists, people who will hypnotize you and take you back. I'll say, okay, tell me about your last few clients. Have you ever encountered a world or a date in the future? Or have you ever encountered kind of a world they describe you don't recognize? They'll always ask, what year is it and all. And almost inevitably, they'll say, funny you should ask. Like just a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody who said it was this bizarre date in the future or some combination of dates and letters and numbers they didn't understand,
Hmm.
or they'll describe a very very alien world. And right now, regression therapists are accepting the idea of parallel lives,
Okay.
simultaneous lives. Yeah, I don't know if they're quite ready to move as far as I've gone, but
Mhm.
it's they're considering this. So I think that we may be dealing with parallel lives, as in the case of Mozart,
Mhm.
we were talking about before. So if we're correct, that would be an approach that might want to be considered.
Interesting. Question in the chat room is: does he believe in survival of the soul?
Survival of the soul. Uh, I think the whole message here is life with a capital L, capital IFE. All right. Um, you have to, in order to get the right answer, you have to ask the right question. All right. And everybody asks that question. Uh, Whenever anybody would ask, what happens to us when we die, or where do we go when we die? And I was a pain in the neck question in the seminary, as you can imagine. The question pops into my mind: well, where were you before you were conceived? You know, and again, if everything is parallel, then maybe nothing happens when you die. You know, maybe we always compare it, as do many indigenous cultures, with the tree. The tree's got a million leaves on it, but you're the whole tree. One or two leaves fall off, so what?
Mhm.
It's inconsequential. The behavior, this is for another show, the behavior of alien life forms, and I'm they recently brought me in. MUFON recently brought me in to the ERT, or the Experience and Resource Team, as one of the paranormal advisors on this, and because they were always running into parallel kinds of phenomena. People
Mhm.
get abducted, all of a sudden they're having poltergeist activity in their house.
Right.
Crossover phenomena, it's known. So as far as survival of the soul, uh, first of all, you have to define your terms. You have to define what do you mean by soul. If you go back to the ancient Greek, it's animus, or the life, and then you have to figure out, without your body, are you still you?
Mhm.
Because you get away from the Cartesian dualism, and whole new approaches are required. So, as with my mother, yeah, I mean, surviving in many parallel worlds, more than surviving, thriving. I think everything that is possible is true somewhere in the multiverse, somewhere or somewhen. But is death even possible
Mhm.
with various facets of yourself, so many versions of yourself? How could there be death even for the body?
Right.
And so again, new ideas. I think what do you have to survive for? You're thriving already in many facets, many parallel lives, and it's all you.
Mhm.
So yes, life with a capital LIFE.
Okay. Another question is: can a parallel world bleed into this world?
Oh yeah, I mean, is the Pope from Argentina? Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time, and I don't know if they're really well. We don't call them. We literally had to invent a vocabulary to talk about this stuff. We being Ben and myself,
Mhm.
we use the term overwash, um, intersect point, and the flashing nexus. Okay, as ways to look at this. Intersect points, as we were talking earlier about the bubbles, they connect at a certain point. There's that. There's also the window area kind of thing with everything kind of happening. Overwashes are overlaps of parallel worlds that will mix somewhat. It's inhabitants, it's energies, things like that. Anything is possible, and I've seen most of it in this. Uh, as far as bleeds, actually, Ed Warren used the term bleed through a couple of points. And then one of the reasons we split up in 1978 was because their ideas were continuing along the path, and I was getting into this stuff. So
Mhm.
they didn't really understand it. So we kind of went our separate ways. But
Mhm.
yeah, it happens all the time. Multiverse is like Swiss cheese.
So
There's
when
a
we
reason for that.
talk about the multiverse, and I'm thinking about these kids again. Not so much the whole past life thing. These kids that are experiencing these memories of maybe like the kid that was the bomber pilot. Is
Yeah,
that a
I
parallel
mean,
universe that? But it's like a past parallel universe that's in existence.
Well, again, I think he's living that life right now. My own son Ben. One of the reasons I brought him into this was as soon as he could talk, he was talking about things like that. He was a
Mhm.
soldier doing this, that, the other thing, and I think again that these are lives going on right now,
Mhm.
and we can learn from them. It's another twist on the whole reincarnation thing. Only it's not reincarnation; it's parallel lives. But again, as I say, six of one, half dozen the other, depending on how you look at it. Again, the notion of the past or the future is our concept and is acceptable to our undeveloped consciousness. That's how we see things happening, right? Um, but how do you know? How do you know what's going to happen in the future? Precognition, clairaudience. How do you know all these things? Because it's going on right now, and you're there. That's how that seems. That, in our opinion, that's how that works. So
And like,
all of the paranormal can be explained by this.
and then technically, the visions that you're having of that is you're getting a look into that life, which is that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
exactly.
That's
But the
fascinating.
thing is, I'm sorry.
That's fascinating.
Oh yeah, well, indeed it is. And of course, we haven't even gotten into the notion. There's something you touched on. I thought it was very good. Are we looking at aliens?
Right.
You know, when I was in that house in Bridgeport and we were attacked, the Warrens weren't even there. They're up to some TV show, but we're attacked by entities that are were supposed to be demons.
Mhm.
Uh, they came. One of them stood right in front of me, and I had a physical struggle with it to protect this little girl. That thing was alien. Now, in a very broad sense of that, I'm not saying it was some other planet. I mean,
Mhm.
what does that even mean in the context of the multiverse as we've been discussing it? But it was far more alien than evil, totally other, you know, and hungry and hostile, didn't care about us at all.
Mhm.
So I think that's another question of what are we really dealing with? Now, people will sometimes say, "Aha, you were in the seminary, you must think that all aliens are actually demons." Well,
Right.
no, actually, I think a lot of the aliens we do, a lot of the demons we think are actually alien, one form or another. So this is what we run into.
No, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like I said, when I was reading that book, and that was my aha moment. With what I was doing as an investigator, because when you hear these accounts from people that have been abducted and what they're going through afterwards, it sounds just like these cases that we've been investigating for years.
Yeah, exactly. And it all depends on how you approach them. I mean, maybe we could be wrong. Maybe the old ideas are right. You could do things wrong for 50 years. But on the other hand, I don't think so because of the success we've had.
Hmm.
And, the whole, well, that Bridgeport case descended into chaos at the end. Anybody, I recommend Bill Hall's The World's Most Haunted House book as a good guide to that case. But if you, even if we're wrong, what we suggest doing, Ben and I call it the Peter Pan theory. Think happy thoughts.
Hmm.
In other words, the more positive energy you have in your life, the less trouble you're going to have with negative energy, right?
Hmm.
And that's good advice for any family or any person. So, yeah, I think I like to think we're on the right track.
I would think that, like you say, writing down your dreams would be interesting now when you look at it from this perspective, because sometimes your dreams are in the here and now. Sometimes your dreams are things you've never done before with that person.
That's true. And you find various, when you write them down in detail, you find various parallels. You
Hmm.
can, at least for me, I can return to the scene just by reading the narrative, even if it's 20 years ago.
Hmm.
It's like it's real. And I think it's real because it's still going on. It's kind of, as we said about deja vu, that's part of your super life. It's another term we had to invent,
Right.
super life. So,
Now you wrote a book about all this, right?
oh yeah, there are several. The two of the most recent would be a little shameless self promotion here. Uh, yeah, from Schiffer Books, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong,
I got that
and
one.
then
See that?
most recently, oh look at that, you got it. Most recently, there 2019, there was Dancing Past the Graveyard. Poltergeist, Parasites, Parallel Worlds, and God. That's just written by me, and that's from Schiffer as well. I actually made it into hardcover. That was I impressed myself that way.
Cool.
But those are things I hated writing that book. Those are cases that I never mentioned before that really, really illustrate the multiverse idea. People I've dealt with who were stuck in parallel worlds, who had died here and things like that. But if people are interested in that's the one that they might want to read.
Fantastic. What's next for you?
Well, Ben and I are working. I'm involved in MUFON now and doing all this stuff, and we lecture at a lot of UFO conferences. A lot of the paranormal people don't like us because we're bad for business. We question all their ideas, and so we're writing a book called "Behind the Paranormal 3: Uneasy Skies," with our own UFO experiences and those of our guests over the last. We've starting our 15th year on the air. I guess we've been on the air almost as long as you have, and we'll be that'll be out next year.
And what about your podcast, your show? Let's hear about that a little bit.
Oh yes, okay. We're on an actual AM/FM station in Rhode Island, Boston, Providence market, but it goes out everywhere on the internet. There's a video stream, and it's all on YouTube and iTunes and all this. It's called Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, and Behind the Paranormal .com is a good place to find out about where to hear it. And we have over like 1,100 free recorded shows if you have the time. So,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I learned so much tonight.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. I even feel a little better from the allergies having yacked all this time.
I was like that this weekend. I was out working in the backyard and a lot of dust, and I could
Oh
hardly.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, I don't think you have the pollen we have in the east here.
Yeah, it was really bad. All right,
First.
sir. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to talk to you on a future date, maybe about stuff, because I mean, I
Sure.
could sit here for hours talking about this. I think it's absolutely fascinating.
Well, I'm here.
All right, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, guys. I forgot to ask about his websites, but I have those up, of course, at the end. That was interesting. It's a different view on the paranormal, and how to look at it. I'm always open-minded to stuff like that, and I agree there's concern about, what happens with our loved ones when they pass, et cetera, et cetera. But, you got to have an open mind. I mean, it's like anything else. Like even now, eggs are bad for you. Next thing you know, eggs are good for you, and then eggs are bad for you again, and blah, 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 blah. Everything is ever changing with this. So anyway, I have links to his books and his websites, of course, so you guys can check him out if you so desire. And I will get his video. In fact, let me look at that video right now in his chat, in the private chat. And somehow I'm gonna make a copy of this video. Hang on. Let me make a copy of this real quick. Because once I kill it, I kill the chat. So I'm gonna pop over on that right now. That's what I'm doing is I'm pushing buttons. Just bear with me, and I'm gonna go over there. Hopefully I don't lose you guys. Okay. Really? Okay. Well, let me try that one more time. It's telling me the domain's for sale. What was that? You never know with things. Okay, I don't want to get kicked off StreamYard either here. Okay. So let me go back in one more time. Let's try this one more time. I'm going to Google it and find it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Let's see. Ah, there it is. Okay, we don't want the audio on. Okay, the audio's off. All right. So I'll pull that up and put it up on the website later. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And interesting show. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I agree. It was fascinating, Jerry. Thank you to everybody that came tonight. Tomorrow is going to be a little change of pace. We're going to be interviewing a man named John Potash. John Potash has written a couple books about governments having a hand in the death of celebrities. So we're going to take a look into that. And we're talking about people like Tupac and celebrities like that. So come on in tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, usual time. And we'll be here talking to John Potash about that stuff. So it's going to be an interesting night. But I want to thank you all for coming. And if you do have TikTok, be sure to visit our TikTok over there as California Haunts. And subscribe to YouTube, please, if you're watching from YouTube. We're looking for subscribers. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. Equal opportunity here. And check out our website, CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com, because our website also has the easiest way to get to the YouTube site. Because if you try to find us on YouTube, you're going to go every which way, and even though we have a dedicated YouTube address. So that's the best way. Just click on any video over there, and you'll get to YouTube. We also have, we've been on the radio, we've been doing this a long time, so we also have a lot of archives from Blog Talk Radio, which I'm in the process of converting over to the new website. So be on the lookout for CaliforniaHauntsRadio.com for that as well. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming, and you see that ticker at the bottom, and the reason for that is because we are technically a nonprofit, and everything you see comes out of my pocket, whether it's mics, cameras, computers, and even stuff for the paranormal team. All the equipment that we purchase comes out of my pocket, unless it's donated. And so I could use a little help paying bills, get the internet bill done. You can do that at paypal.me at California Haunts. Or if you're uncomfortable with PayPal, Venmo, you can do Venmo and just type in California Haunts. But I'd appreciate it. It helps us keep the show on the air and keep the guests coming and all that good stuff. Anyway, I want to thank you all, and I'm going to sign off now, and have a good evening. All right? Here we go, and here's the information on him. Websites are behindtheparanormal.com, newenglandghosts.com, and turninghome.com. The book is Behind the Paranormal is one of the books. And you've got Faces at the Window and the Bell Witch Project. Dancing Past the Graveyard, Footsteps in the Attic. And of course, they're available at Amazon and probably from his website, more than likely as well. Again, thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a great evening.